What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. First, go follow me at Kojak Podcast, COJAC, on all the socials. You want to support the show? I got a Venmo account, same handle, and a Patreon, Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. So thanks for supporting the people that do. And I got a nice Venmo donation the other day. That was at times fly. I guess that was like 2 weeks ago, but thanks. And if you could leave a review, that would be awesome. I read the reviews like a loser, send them to my family and stuff. It makes me so happy. So if you enjoy the show, you learn something, please leave a review. It means just as much to me. So that's the intro. That's the business, old business, new business, tons of trains, right? What's going on? Nice to see you, Dave. Dude, what's going on? I know I'm not doing as many shows, so it's nice to see you, but all this, and I can't tell. There's I saw like another thing exploded the other day, and granted, our infrastructure is horrible, right? Like it wouldn't pass any, like bridges are crumbling, roads, as you guys know, potholes everywhere. Our infrastructure needs billions to fix it. So I don't know if it has to do with that. Is it planned chaos? Is it CIA sabotage or FBI sabotage? I have no idea, but it just seems like it's crazier and crazier. Things keep happening. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So today's show, if you didn't listen to the last one, you probably don't need to listen to it to understand what's going on. But I got this book, The Imperial Cruise, totally out of my normal conspiracy kind of like secret society work. It's about, it got referenced in one of my opium books that I was reading. Robert, what's going on, dude? So nice of you. But the reason why I kept doing it was I was learning, it's all about Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, Skull and Bones. That's how his family made their millions. Was they were them and the Russell family were opium dealers. So and so much of the economy, the bedrock of American businesses, banks, was built from the opium industry. And I don't need to go into all of them, but more than you imagine, their banks, everything started because of this illicit opium trade in the 1800s. So, but the Taft family, that's how they got their money. Yale, Skull and Bones, that's how they got their money. So that's why this book got referenced in the other book I was reading. But this day, we're going to go over so much stuff, and it's just fascinating to me, and then we'll get right into it. But so the book's called The Imperial Cruise because in 1905, Teddy Roosevelt's president. And as president, make treaties with other countries, you need to pass it to Congress and the Senate. Well, he didn't want to do that. He knew he'd be taking a side. They didn't want to take a side in America. We at least had some values then. So he sponsors this trip with 80 people. His daughter goes on the trip. Taft goes on the trip to travel all through Asia, because the next step for America in Teddy's mind is jumping into Asia. And what he does, though, is behind the backs of the American public, the people that entrusted him in this office, he worked a backroom deal with the Japanese, which literally was the first stepping stone to build them into the World War II machine that killed many Americans, tortured many people. And I have respect for the country, Japan as a country, but this is why they were able to do it, was because Teddy worked this backroom deal. He willingly, knowingly, didn't care, enslaved Korea to Japan, where, I'm not exaggerating, over 100,000 quote unquote comfort women were raped, tortured, beaten, killed. And this was all from him. And back in this time, this Anglo-Saxon ideal, like this is the greatest race in the world, we are the top of the top. That's where it took hold. So it's a great book. I mean, I don't know if you guys would be interested in reading the whole thing, but I really enjoyed it. So again, we're going to start off. So last episode, they just left, and everyone loves Alice Roosevelt, Teddy's daughter. She's like a Kardashian in this day and age. But they go to the Philippines, okay? And the Philippines, they called them the Pacific N-word, Negroes and the other one. And we'll just get into it because it's fascinating, dude. But the lovely quote from William McKinley, this was before Teddy was president, but we come not to make war upon the Philippines, but to protect them in their homes, in their employment, and then in their personal and religious rights. McKinley. Another one. Just to contrast that, what McKinley said, that's what we're doing there, right? We're going to protect them in their homes, everyone. Thank goodness. What would they do without America? Well, an unknown Robert Austell, soldier in the Philippines in 1902, his quote, The people of the United States want us to kill all the men, F all the women, and raise up a new race in these islands. Little different kind of a model. But that's another thing this book reminded me of was how long America has been lying, using the military, using imperialism as a cover to go into these countries, not as a cover for imperialism, but you understand, use like whatever. Oh, we need to save their democracy. Oh, they're being mean to women. Oh, they're doing this. We're going to protect you because we're the good guys. We want to help you. We don't want to enslave you like those evil European countries. We're going to help raise you up. And they've been doing this since then, and probably before this, Spanish-American War or Mexican War, all these things. Not so much, I guess, those. Really, this started, I would say, a lot right in this 1900s time frame. This real, true imperialistic tendencies were by quote unquote helping. But so that's why we're going to the Philippines, because we had the Spanish-American War. The Philippines are ours, and we're going to be nicer than the Spanish, right? And America's media was behind it the whole time. They gassed up our military and our government, saying we're doing a totally new things in the Philippines after beating back Spain. And just as people are smart now, they were smart back then. An anti-imperialist league founded to oppose the annexation of the Philippines. But just as all good ideas, the media is often far too powerful, and it crashed. It lost. They couldn't keep their group together. And I'm torn as like a pretty big nationalist and as a Christian, but it's not as cut and dry as it may seem. The Baltimore American newspaper wrote, "It is the same old law of the survival of the fittest. The weak must bend to the strong, and today the American race is the sturdiest, the noblest on earth." Could you imagine a new American newspaper writing that today? You couldn't, because they would never write that. So that's why I'm torn on this subject. Like I said, I'm a big nationalist. I can't be concerned with how these people in these poor countries are doing. I want them to be able to eat and all these things, but I also want America to succeed and Americans to succeed. So it's like a tough thing where and this book's written from a very left-leaning slant, a very America evil slant. So it's difficult, but these are the facts that happened, right? So you have to take them for what it's worth. And so imperialism at this time was like a dirty word, as it is now. And McKinley desperately tried to remove himself using that word in America, when what America was doing. Quote unquote, the white man's burden. I'm sure you guys have heard it. Rosalind, hello, how are you? The white man's burden. I'm sure you guys have, and this is why I love history. It just relates so well to the current time. But this was a poem written about depicting what Westerns actually believe, that it's the white man's burden to raise up the world. So no one's writing the white man's burden in poems today. But what do you think all these woke left-leaning weenies that are white are doing? They're taking upon themselves to save the lesser, and they probably don't even know they're doing this. They're saving these lesser people, right? That's what it is. If you truly felt someone was your equal, I'll say, yeah, he deserves every right that I have. But beyond that, dude, you can handle it. You don't need another grown man fighting in your corner for this to help injustices that are kind of vague and not very clear. But so back then it was the same thing. It's just they wrote a poem. Were writing the poem, The White Man's Burden. And yeah. It's the savages, we're saving savages, blah, blah, blah. Oh, good, Rosalind. I'm so glad things are going well. That's so great. In this crazy time and world, that's awesome. But so the Philippines at this time had a totally working democracy, right? Spain was kicked out by America, essentially, and they had a beloved president, an ardent nationalist. His name was Aguinaldo. But, a democracy that's not being controlled by America, that's not the best for business, is it? So in 1899, the U.S. military was ordered to fire on Filipino intruders. They had a base in the Philippines because of the Spanish-American War. And at this time, America's like, what should we do with this country, right? So there's these 4 drunk Filipinos. This is how this war, even though it's not called a war, started. 4 drunk guys were stumbling around, and they went onto a military base, and they were slaughtered by the U.S. military. And instead of, not blowing this out of proportion, maybe the one guy, after they killed these 4 Filipinos, he ran to his superior and he woke him up. He said, "It is on." And cannons, rifles began to volley between the Filipinos and U.S. armies. And this works out well because it put the Filipinos as the aggressors. You know how much our military, our government loves that. So this is, I imagine the story went something like 4 Filipino freedom fighters came out to shoot at American soldiers when that wasn't the story. So again, here's another, not a war, but a battle, death match, whatever you want to call it, that started by a false flag event that the government lies about. The U.S. forces killed more than 3,000 Filipino freedom fighters in 24 hours. Just listen to this stuff. More Filipinos died defending their country on that first day, just the first day, than Americans that died on storming the beaches of Normandy. That's how many people we killed, or America killed. 2 days later, the Spanish-American War, the Treaty of Paris, was ratified only by one vote. So not resounding to end the war there. So again, even in the 1900s, the turn of the century, the powers that be realize war is good for the economy. And they probably recognized that much earlier than that. But isn't that sickening? Spain was, you could push them over like with a finger, dude. It was their empire crumbled at this time of the night. It was done. It was dunzo garbanzo. And we kicked the hell out of them. We took Cuba, Philippines, Guam, on and on. And what is our people that we voted into power? What do? They say, keep fighting them. Keep one vote away from continuing the Spanish-American War. Isn't that just insane? But the Americans, the Americans paid Spain $20 million for the Philippines, equating to $2 per Filipino, because they had 10 million people there who they were referred to by the Americans, by politicians, by the media as the Pacific Negroes. So just as it was assumed in Vietnam years later, the assumption was that the U.S. would mow down these uninformed savages, right? Like we are the power, dude. We're not our superpower yet, but we're way more powerful in this little island. This battle of these freedom fighters will be short. And as history rhymes, as I already said it, just like they thought in Vietnam, just like they thought in wherever else, they burned out the barrios, like little huts these people lived in. They saw the civilians as inferior, short, less than human. One village attacked one of the first battles, and a soldier wrote how women were being raped by soldiers. Morals became awfully bad. Drinking wine and whiskey got the upper hand of the benevolent assimilation. And General MacArthur, who I know very little about, he's valued very much in American history. This may open your eyes if you don't know much about General MacArthur. He justified the raping, killing, the murdering in the Senate testimony. And just like Vietnam, when the Filipinos were cut, they responded, right? They're fighting. It's a war or battle. They cut and gutted a U.S. soldier. Retribution had to be had, and reprisals was a massacre of over 1,000 men, women, and children were killed for that killing of that U.S. soldier. The Red Cross itself even said the Americans were determined to kill every Filipino in sight, killing in this village, all but one mixed woman, who the officers then raped and then gave to the enlisted men officers after that. And all war is evil. I don't want to paint this picture that America is the ultimate evil, because it's not. We have amazing people here. The majority, 99.9% of Americans are amazing people, just like the rest of the world. But this small percentage that knows what happens when people get into war, all these things, they fight these battles not for a real good cause. They have to make up a just cause. But what they fight for is for economic reasons. And that's one of the saddest things in the world, right? Like, we send our men to be slaughtered. We slaughter third world countries or whatever, not for, they haven't been assassinating Americans or coming after the president. No, they just have economic things that we want to take from them. Just crazy, right? So, and after taking one of the village, the top people, they got the mayor, the priest, they're all rounded up, and then they call it water detail was yelled. And waterboarding was the preferred method of torture. Not that it was the only one. Flogging, scorching prisoners, open fires, rope cure, that's what it was called, hanging from the ceiling. And have you guys, so I remember I was like in 2000, during the Iraqi war, after 2001, I was like a young guy, like 12 or 13. And I kept hearing on the news how we're waterboarding people. And I remember that was like a big thing, like, we're terrorists, they're doing this. And so I remember I was like, and because I remember listening to like a military person that said on the TV, like, it's not that bad, blah, blah, blah. So I went in my tub that night and I put a washcloth over my head and tried to waterboard myself to find out what is waterboarding. And it's difficult to breathe under there. I don't know if you guys ever dabbled in the same thing, but I don't recommend it. It wasn't enjoyable. No cure no cure is so severe for these brainless monkeys who can appreciate no sense of honor, kindness, or justice. Quote from a soldier. And another one said how they better kill them just like the Indians. And so in the war, this is a fascinating statistic. Oh, this blew my mind. So in the war, the ratio from injured to killed. So injured is the first number, killed is the second number. In the Civil War had been 5-1. So you had 5 soldiers that were injured for every one that died. What do you think it was in the Philippines? The saving democracy war, the helping, the helping of this poor country who's been enslaved, colonized by Spain. So 5-1 Civil War, it was 1-4. So that means for every one person injured in this Filipino freedom fight, whatever, 4 of them were killed. So this is how violent and deadly this engagement was compared to the Civil War, which was utterly horrendous, but only 5 people would get injured for every 1 dead. 4 would be dead for every 1 injured. And I just found that's killing 4 times more Filipinos than injuring them. And what's the logic behind that? Again, we're there to help them, right? Aren't we? We're here to help install a democracy in this lesser race. General MacArthur, take it away here. This is his nice quote. So again, General MacArthur, the famed general, men of Anglo-Saxon stock. This is in response to why are we killing so many of them? Men of Anglo-Saxon stock do not succumb as easily to the wounds as men of inferior races. Wild, dude. And I'm the biggest anti-pulling down statues guy. History is history, and different. We were thinking different things were acceptable that aren't acceptable today. But that's a pretty insane quote to say. Granted, it's just a different time. But in 1899, Teddy Roosevelt wrote an essay called Expansion and Peace. And he explained that peace may only come through war. Peace through strength. Flippy, what's up? And David says, I like to take air with me underwater. I'm a good breath holder. I was a very competitive swimmer in my days. That's hilarious, dude. But so I think Teddy's quote is peace through strength. Total 19, or maybe is that from 1984? If it's not, it should be. But just how you need to have peace by doing war. I mean, this was obviously before 1984 was written. So I wonder if Orwell pulled some quotes from Teddy because that's like all he talks about, really. But after a year of fighting, General MacArthur said the war was not winding down and the guerrilla warfare was raising. Since the freedom fighters could only survive with the help of civilians, what do? Well, then you focus on the civilians. Good move, General MacArthur. So they would do this they'd randomly go into choosing villages, forcing the populace into concentration camps. They'd to leave all their possessions, just what they could carry. Needless to say, the camps were not in the best of conditions, and officers set the example. One officer, General Frederick Funston, ordered to take no prisoners. He bragged to reporters that he personally hung 35 civilians. And so again, this reminds me a lot of Vietnam. They don't know. They're so angry at just this race because some of them are shooting back at them. They kill them all. So I guess human nature, it's just so predictable, right? Like war will bring this out in people. Flippy, I'm sure you didn't see that kind of stuff. Flippy was in the military, but I think you were on active duty, weren't you? And I'd be interesting to see, do you see people make like their minds make this change and I can't speak to it. I've never served in the military. I've never been in an active war zone. And I don't say it's a bad thing, but because you need to do what you need to survive. But it's just amazing that even in the 1900s, we think of gentlemanly, blah, blah, blah. They did the same exact things as that we would do in Vietnam 60 years later. Another guy, Major Edward Glenn beat Funston. He bragged he forced 47 prisoners to kneel before him and repent their sins before bayoneting them. And 1900 was a McKinley election year. So he told the populace the time for martial law in the Philippines is over. He can't have all this bad United States Marine Corps. I remember that, Flippy. I thought you were like an air guy too. Am I wrong on that? Am I pulling that out of nowhere? So thank you for your service as always, Flippy. McKinley needs to tell the populace it's going well. They're getting these stories of this insane violence in the Philippines. And so he says, all right, we solved it. It's calmed down. We're going to install a civil government. And he needed the perfect poster boy to help him do that. And so in 1876, President Ulysses S. Grant summoned Judge Alphonso Taft as the Secretary of War, charged with assimilating the Indians at the height of the Indian Wars. Why does this relate? Well, McKinley was summoning his son for the exact same thing for the Pacific N-words. And, again, history rhymes just too much. This one's in the same family. But Taft played right along. And his quote was, America is doing them great good. They need our help. The white man's burden, right? And Big Bill, that's William Taft, was a big advocate of monkey see, monkey do. If we show them how we live, they'll want to be just like us. And so, again, we learn nothing from this is the 1900s. We do the same thing. So it's just the same lies. I don't think it's an actual reason, but the same lies we use with the Middle East and wherever else we want to go fight. Oh, the people want to be like us. They don't say it in these terms anymore, but it's the same exact stuff. And his most famous saying, Taft called them his little brown brothers, which, it's not funny, but it's a little funny, right? That's a little funny, but just like the funny in the sense that it's so out of place that you could never say that today. But yet here's like a president saying it, not President Ben, but regardless. And Taft pumped up McKinley and the press how things were going great in the Philippines in the 1900s, except in reality, it was a shit show. MacArthur's army controlled 117 square miles of a total 116,000 square miles. So we controlled like 1% of what was of the Philippines, but yet it's going perfect. It's going exactly well. And the populace was not exactly cheering for the Americans to stay. Do you guys remember those like propaganda videos in the Middle East of like that Iraqis or Afghanis cheering when the American soldiers came down? Dude, if they had video cameras like that, and then they would do the same thing. They would have done the same thing here. And you look back and you're like, and you made us feel good after 9/11. Like, yeah, they want us here. Freedom, baby. Woo. And, the chances of that not being staged, not being planned, very small, very small. But regardless, McKinley, he needed a running mate. And that would be good old Teddy, who helped with the campaign slogan. And this is a way long slogan. Teddy Roosevelt, I was disappointed in this slogan. Here it goes. The American flag has not been planted in foreign soil to acquire more territory, but for humanity's sake. They hit this point hard, dude, that we're not here to steal your resources. We might steal a few. We're not here to slaughter your people. We might slaughter a few thousand, but we're here to bring humanity to you guys, you savages. We are going to teach you how to do it all. And that's way too long of a campaign slogan, right? What's LBB's, Flippy? But it's unthinkable that the United States would abandon the Philippines to their own tribes. Another direct quote. And then November 6, 1900, how did they count all those votes? Man, we got to go back in time and figure out how they got McKinley's election that day. We can't do it now. We got computers and it was all paper then. Well, they counted the votes and it handed the Republican Party the biggest victory since 1872 with Grant. And I never realized how popular McKinley was. And he requested $400 million for the War Department. If it's going so great, if we're a civil government now, why do you need $400 million for your military? So even in the 1900s, in 1900, little hilarious, dude. Could you imagine saying that today? Oh my God. But 400 million. So already we see the military industrial complex blowing it out of the water. I'd be interested to compare American military cost with European country prices and see how, $400 million. This is before the Federal Reserve Act. This is before that we got off the gold standard. That's a lot of money, dude. That's tons of money. The average person at this time was making $200 to $400 a year. So this was $400 million. In 1901, the U.S. Army captured the Filipino president Aguinaldo in his mountain lair because he's organizing the freedom fighters, right? He's their enemy, even though he's an elected president, but he's the enemy. And as any honest president, heavy nationalist would, he did not want to see his countrymen continue to be slaughtered, and he succumbed to the U.S. And the NY Times, the bastion of truth, they previously had painted this guy as a lying, cheating worm, evil, right? He's a tyrant, whatever they said. Now, after he succumbed to the U.S. and gave up his power, the New York Times wrote how he was a warm, kind man. And in July 4th, 1901, Independence Day, the civil government was handed over to Big Bill Taft, who lived in a Spanish mansion. And he lived in a literal mansion, Taft. We have 5 carriages, 2 vehicles, 14 ponies. And the quote was, and I don't even know how many servants. But using the same method that would be used in the Middle East, Taft would meet with collaborating Filipinos. They'd be given tons of cash and to keep their village and people in line. So again, that's exactly what we've done in the Middle East and everywhere. We find leaders that are willing to sell their country up the river for boatloads of money. They have some power, whether it's, black market power, whether it's violence, they got the power, whatever it is. The US gives them millions of dollars. Just keep your village in line. That's all you have to do. Beat them, kill them. We don't want to know, but keep them in line. And we did that in the 1900s as well. And he tried to build from the top down, his collaborators joining Taft's kindergarten class of how to be a leader. It's just crazy, right? Like, you could not do any of this stuff today. You couldn't even talk about it on the news like this. But anyway, they only allowed 3% of this kindergarten class to vote. The large majority will not for a long time be capable of intelligently exercising the right to vote. You know what? That quote is just as applicable today, because I would say probably 90% of the populace has no business voting. They have no idea what's going on. They can't even tell you how many states we have, but they vote. So I understand this logic a little bit. Sounds like Taft doesn't love democracy, though, if that's what he's feeling like. And again, it's just so pathetic. Millions were dumped in the Philippines to build schools, hospitals. And now where else have I heard that? Well, now it's billions. Where have we dumped billions into Ukraine to help give people pocket cash, or whatever Biden's phrase he used? It's money laundering. It's doing the same thing. It's just no one cares about history enough that they don't notice this. They even if they saw it 10 years ago, they still don't understand it. All these military industrial contracts, blah, blah, blah. And we've been doing this for over 150 years. 120 years. And I wonder who got these contracts to build, or who's doing the accounting. How do we know that this $100 is going to this tribal leader who's keeping the tribe in line? Or are they giving them $50 and the general, the major, whatever that's taking charge of it, maybe they're pocketing the other 50. Used to be you had to own property to be eligible to vote. And David, I kind of like him in this area where I think that should probably come back. Why should somebody who takes from the system have the vote that's equal to somebody who pays into the system? And, not that but I think that would actually change things. I don't know if you guys ever seen these graphs, but if only like white men voted, it's red across the board. If only white women voted, it's blue across the board. And it's and you don't think these political organizations have quantified this and put it in ways how they know how to spend their money? If we're trying to get this person, this type of group, we do this. I mean, it's all algorithmed. But anyway, that's a whole different story. But anyway, so 2 weeks, regardless, in September 14th, 1902, Taft got a new boss. Teddy was sworn in as president as McKinley was killed by 2 bullets just 2 weeks into his presidency. And 2 weeks after that, the villagers revolted and killed 51 Americans, known as the Belongia Massacre. And so General Jake Smith, also McKinley, he was killed at the Buffalo World's Fair, if you guys didn't know that. At the time, it was the largest electric lights thing in the country, at least, probably the world. And yet they had all these light bulbs. It was like the most light bulbs the world had ever seen at this point. We get shot, and they take him where there's no lights, and they have a candle room. It should have been saved. He didn't get saved. He died. So somebody probably killed him. Even then, we had someone that tried to take out Andrew Jackson. Obviously, Lincoln was assassinated, and McKinley assassinated as well. So General Jake Smith, he ordered the U.S. troops to kill all Filipino men in the area because of this massacre, if they're over the age of 10. I wish you to kill and burn. The more you kill and burn, the better you will please me. Again, war is just, I don't know what it's like, but that sounds like something an evil person would say. And so the entire population of Samar Island, 250,000, spread over 5,000 square miles of jungle, had 10 days to abandon their homes and enter concentration camps, or they would be shot on sight. There were no U.S. casualties. And the orgies of violence, whispers made it to the Americas, and the congressmen began to ask questions, because in the 1900s, you still had honest politicians that probably got voted because of their qualities and their attributes and what they stood for. But Teddy worried that this would hurt his next election, so he tried to rein in the American troops, but it was too late. I love how he's trying to rein it in after he's encouraged this violence for 3 years, but because people are starting to hear it, he's pulling back. And so they had these U.S. Senate hearings on the Philippines in 1902. And Taft and Teddy tried to say how kind we were being and how any evidence of violence was just a few bad apples. And there was a letter from a soldier that got brought up in the hearing that soldier had personally bragged about waterboarding 160 people, which 134 have died. So much more violence showed that the top not only knew about the violence, but condoned it and encouraged it. They just got better at hiding this stuff these days, right? They don't, the same, what's going on in Syria, you don't even know, or Yemen, you have no idea what's going on in all these countries, Venezuela, whatever, the CIA's there. You have no idea about the violence we're behind. And sometimes the US, what they do is they'll overthrow a leader, put a new leader in, they'll do the violence. And because then the press will say, oh, democracy is saved, blah, blah, blah. And this guy's the worst evil son of a bitch in the world. And the guy they kicked out was because he wasn't selling his country up the river. And Teddy had to make a big deal about his intolerance of violence. 44 officers he tried. 38 were convicted. Teddy is down. He is not down with the violence. I'm going to take care of these generals, everybody, press and American public. I will not stand for this. What were their punishments, you may ask? They probably kicked out of the military, right? Or maybe thrown in the brig, arrested, fined. No, worse, reprimands. And I know you probably are afraid of reprimands too, but that's what you have to do in situations like this. You need to take it seriously. And regardless, the media had already sunk into the public. They could not believe that their humanitarian saving military could do such evil things. And so by 1902, the war had cost the American taxpayers $600 million, 4.2 thousand American dead. Meanwhile, the Americans killed 1 to 3 million Filipinos. And this will take the lowest estimate. And this population only had 10 million people in the Philippines at this time. So 1 to 3 million. The lowest estimates is 2 to 300,000 Filipinos slaughtered in 41 months. Here's a statistic for you. World War II was fought over 56 months, so an extra year and change, with 400,000 American deaths. So Hitler killed about the same per month, 7,200, as the American civilizing humanitarian military did in the Philippines. And this is only until 1902. So 1.3 million people we killed. We killed more people there than World War II casualties for America by far. And political cartoons were coming out showing the violence the Americans were bringing. One had a U.S. Army firing squad executing a blindfolded, barefoot Filipino boys, and the caption was read, "Kill every one over 10," because they were born 10 years before we took the Philippines. And the Washington Post wrote how the U.S. Army was systematically executing Filipinos, POWs in one camp. And this even for the 1,300 in this village, this is how sick this is. They had all these people, these men in the concentration camp. They bring a Filipino priest to hear the prisoners' last confessions. Then they would make them dig their own grave, shoot them in the head, and then they hung the priest. I mean, that's evil, dude. That is so evil. And I bet, I never knew this. I highly doubt that 99.9% of America has ever heard about the atrocities that we did over here. But it gets better though. You just wait. But the things are not looking good for the manly Teddy Roosevelt. So he was a master PR man. I talked about last episode how he created his cowboy facade. He was this big Western rancher. No, he wasn't. The longest he stayed out West was 3 months consecutively. These few years that he disappeared to run his ranch and be a man and hunt wild animals and all this stuff like that. He was back in his Manhattan penthouse like I said, the longest he was there was 3 months. He's basically spent these 3 years just riding a train and writing articles about what other people have done, and he took the credit for it. So I am shitting on Teddy Roosevelt pretty hard. I had Tony Arterburn on last week. He likes Teddy a lot. And there's he did some good things as well. I wouldn't say that these people then are pure evil. Like today, Joe Biden is pure evil, and just like Donald Trump. I mean, they're so corrupt that there's nothing good that I could say, because I know they've sold their country up the river. And Teddy might have been the same way, but I'm leaving room for doubt because I don't know enough about him to defend either point. But so he showed images of the Pacific N-word, being benevolently assimilated by the Americans, and he had the perfect place to do it. Dude, this episode has it all. So we talked about the Buffalo World Fair. Just wait. So in 1904, the St. Louis World Fair was the biggest international fair of the World Fair series. It was double the size of the 1893 Chicago one. And I think the Chicago one was 700 acres or 300 acres. So this was double, we're going to say, let's say 400 acres so this show was at least 800 acres of land. And if you guys haven't heard my World Exposition show, it's down far in the back, but it's a sham, whatever that is. I'm not big into Tartaria anymore, but those buildings, they were built before. I read Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods. There's this rock from 50,000 years ago that has a drill hole through the middle of it, which it shows that it had to be a stable drill. It couldn't, it wasn't somebody just hand turning it, and it went at such a high velocity that it's like what the drills go at today. So what does that mean, right? So that doesn't make any sense if we're going by the normal story of history. So, but I just found that interesting. So anyway, the St. Louis Fair, it was double the size. 90 million people would come to the St. Louis World Fair from 45 countries. It was so huge that the 1904 Olympics, first one in the US, was staged in just one small part of the fairgrounds. And with government funds, Roosevelt took over one of the largest parts of the fairgrounds to create. Oh, David, I'd love to hear why you say that, a compromised source. I don't love everything about Graham Hancock, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. So Roosevelt, he gets his money from the government. He doesn't obviously, he buys the best part of the World's Fair for himself. What's he gonna put in there? I mean, secretly, he didn't tell the public, come check out the Roosevelt Exposition. No. He hid himself far away enough back from it. He came and he said, oh my God, you guys put this here. That's exactly what I wanted. What a great idea. So anyway, they took over the largest part to create a make-believe Philippines where fairgoers would see the benevolent assimilation of the humanitarian army. And this is so whatever. This is Teddy Roosevelt. He said, I don't want to exploit this event for political purposes in an election year, guys. So I don't want anything to do with this. If you want to make a Filipino exhibit, by all means, do it. I can't. You understand. I'm trying to be an honest cowboy here. President's Not Breaking the Law would be a quick show. Hilarious. Archaics channel. I'll have to look that up, David. I don't think I've ever seen that. But I just loved how Teddy, whoa. I know I'm getting heat for the Philippines. And that's great that there's a Filipino exhibit in the St. Louis Fair. I just want nothing to do with it. I'm an honest man, right? And he called his zoo-like show the Philippines Reservation. Oh, instead Taft managed it. So Taft, he's a chubby yes man for Teddy Roosevelt his whole career. He does exactly what he's asked with a big smile on his face. He's a yes man. So he manages the Filipino Reservation. And ironically, it was located right next to the Indian Reservation exhibition. So they shipped 1,200 Filipinos to St. Louis, where they presented them as creatures closer to monkeys. So to reinforce the idea that without Americans and the white man's burden, these Filipinos would go extinct. The Smithsonian named the first group of them the missing link. And so positive notes of the exhibition, scientists said, but with proper training, unlike the American Indian, they will be able to accept rather than defy the advancement of the American civilization. A little jab at the Indians there. So this is what they did with the exhibit. It's just, again, it's like funny because it's so out of place. But so what they did was they had like different stages of Filipino assimilation. So the first group was these loincloth, sharp-teethed, having a dog over a Spitfire, wearing like feathers on their heads, yelling, very savage-like, right? And so Americans saw them and said, oh my God, we're there for this. This is why we're there. They can't run the country by themselves. Look what they do without us. They'd be eating dogs and us, biting people, eating people. And so then the middle one was a little less barbaric than the first, right? It was, maybe they had some clothes on, but they're still violent. They're still savages. And then the final stage was the assimilated Filipinos, and there was mostly children. And so they had these dressed in American school clothes, like a shirt and tie, reciting lessons that were like an American school, some in military clothing, twirling their rifle, and looking exactly like the American troops. And then the pamphlet being passed out for this exhibition, on the cover, it had a feather headdress, scary, sharp-toothed looking savages. And then you flipped it to the back of the pamphlet, and it was a beautiful American clothing, Western style, close-shaven Filipino standing straight dressed in a military uniform. I mean, propaganda, if I've ever seen it, first of all. And then they even had the kids in the last stage of the exhibition singing like, "My country 'tis of thee," or one of those songs. And the public ate it up. So this human zoo, thanks, Annika, was literally one of the ways that Teddy kept his power and was going to get elected the next year, because he was getting so much heat from the Philippines. He showed the people, see this, and you know that the people that didn't go saw it in the press, saw it in the newspaper. Oh my God, look how evil these people, they would kill everybody, Oh gosh. Just so wild, just so wild. And this reservation was the most visited part of the St. Louis World's Fair, 18.5 million visitors. The entire US population at the time was 83 million people. So a shit ton of people came to visit the Filipino exhibition. So think how many minds that warped and brainwashed. Back then, I don't think many people were questioning the government the way that you and I question them today. Probably because their track record wasn't too horrible. We're America, the freest, best country in the world. Our government would never lie. They would never do these evil things unless they had to. They clearly have to. So I'm sure people ate it up. They ate it up. Oh, and then you could also, I missed this part, as a souvenir from the Filipino exhibition, you could buy an album of Filipino types, which essentially was a yearbook that you had savage, semi-savage, integrated, assimilated. And who went to see the exhibition? Was it the poor people? No, it's the influential people, the teachers, the politicians, the businessman. And Teddy, the PR whiz, was changing the people's minds. I mean, he was a brilliant guy. Like I said, he wrote these Western novels like he was there, but he wasn't. He might have been there physically for a little while, but he lived on his train. He wasn't actually out there ranching, doing all these things. And so when Princess Alice, that's Teddy's daughter, who the public loved, ate up. They loved to know what she wears, what she eats, who she's talking to, what she says. She's like not Kardashian's a bad example. She's like, I can't think of anybody who's just like loved by the media. I can't think of, but I'm sure you can think of somebody. When she made it to the Filipinos on this long cruise, the Imperial Cruise, the press had a field day contrasting her civilized white Christian bearing with the uncivilized dog eaters. And the ruse worked. Roosevelt celebrated his victory by taking his family on a luxury train trip to St. Louis 2 weeks after the election. And the children, they sang "My Country 'Tis of Thee." So so Big Bill, he's got to go to the Philippines, right? He's got to clean up this shitstorm that's being created there. His wife, who was a horrible lady, horrible. She did not come along with Big Bill on the 1905 cruise. She took the children and went to England. And Helen Taft, Nellie, she was vicious, dude. She we'll get into it. There's a hilarious quote about Taft being beaten by his wife. So the train guy wasn't unloading her bags when she got to England, and she's such like a frigid B word that she did the classic, "Do you know who I am?" And the train conductor in England was like, "No, I don't know who you are." And so she said, "I'm William Taft's wife, the vice president," or whatever he was at this point. And none of it worked. He was like, "Okay, sure you are." But you know how she got the train guy to take her bags? She said, "My husband is with Princess Alice on a trip right now." And that's how much Princess Alice was well known around the world. I talked about last episode how she, on the back of the train, was shooting at telegraph wires as they were driving away. And the public ate it up. And no other woman could have done that. The public would have been, ew, blah, blah, blah. But for her, it was okay. And nothing to do with anything, but on the second night of the cruise, they sectioned off a dance floor, sprinkled cornmeal for grip, which I never heard of, putting cornmeal on a dance floor. And they said that Taft was an amazing dancer. And I just found that funny. Like, he's super fat for that time. Fat for now. He's fat now, but he was super fat at the time. But he's like this elegant ballerina. Just a funny mental picture. If you guys don't know what Howard Taft looks like. Go look him up. He's huge for the day. He's ginormous. He's a planet. But the Taft, he was a reliable Mr. Nice Guy with a beaming smile and a hearty chuckle. And he controlled an enormous budget and a fast-growing military machine. Millions of people were subjects of the War Department. And as a taxpayer, like in Cuba, Panama, and a taxpayer complaint to Taft about the War Department. Again, there's so few people, not for grip. I think I would more for slip. Yeah, isn't that crazy? And how they clean it up? I guess they have slaves on the boat to clean it up, so it doesn't matter. But a taxpayer wrote to Taft, as a tax-paying citizen, I beg to ask the following question. How many days, or if not days, hours, has Secretary of War Taft spent at his desk in Washington? So it's just funny how people haven't changed. Well, my dad would say something like that today, or maybe your parents or grandparents. But do you think that our generation, my generation, the woke weenies, they maybe brought up about Trump, how he's never in his room, he's always golfing, but they just do it to the other side. It's pathetic. Princess Alice is a big reason why the American joined on the side of Britain. Narrative exchange? Thank you. Did not know that, though. That's fascinating. And Taft could dance his ass off. Come on, dude. I'm just thinking of like a big fat guy doing ballerina stuff. It makes me smile in my head. But Taft, he had no knowledge of the military that he's running. And basically, he's just a fat yes man for Teddy Roosevelt, who knew how the military worked. And as mentioned earlier, Taft was the son of Skull and Bones co-founder Alphonso Taft, who graduated from Yale in 1833. And Alphonso tried his luck on the frontier land known as Cincinnati. Hilarious that in 1839, that was the frontier land, but the rest is history. The Tafts dominated Ohio politics since then. And Alphonso was the Secretary of War nominated by Ulysses S. Grant. He was Attorney General. He was an ambassador to Austria-Hungary, Imperial Russia. And in 1857, Big Bill, Fat William Taft, was born in Cincinnati to a very domineering mom. And his weight gain was from the stress that him and his father put on him. Oh, wait, let me just read this. She was heavily influential to the Christian identity. Interesting, dude. That's kind of what they said in this book, but not as well as you said in Narrative Exchange. Nice. Thank you for that. Any more things about Princess Alice? Shoot it there in the comment section. So his dad, Taft, I feel bad for being fat because his dad said to him, I do not think you have accomplished as much this past year as you ought with your opportunities. That's a rough thing for a dad to say. And he would marry his second mom, Helen Nellie Heron, whose dad was law partners with President Rutherford Hayes. And this is the quote. Bill wrote his wife. So he was broken, dude. I mean, he was so beyond broken. That's why he just went along to get along. He wrote to his wife, I need you to scold me. I need you to scold me. What the heck, dude? This big fat guy's writing to his wife, I need you to scold me? Ugh, sounds disgusting. And so Bill is either like a freak or he has some serious mental issues. But back to the Imperial Cruise. We're going to be jumping all around. So next is Hawaii. But then they land in Hawaii after leaving San Francisco. And there's literals, there she is for Princess Alice, whispered, yelled among the crowd. A lot happening in Ohio. Oh, wait. Princess Alice's husband dies right before World War II, and he was a chancellor of Canada, so she inherited the position. She paid to have free markets put into the Christian identity. Wow, dude. Wow. I would show it, but it'll be too long on the box. That is amazing. A lot happening in Ohio. Grant popularized lobbying. Interesting, Flippy. And I could see that. Since Grant, obviously 25 years prior to this story, but in this story, lobbying is at a whole new level already. It's so corrupt already. It's beyond corrupt. It's beyond fixing in my mind. I mean, the Federal Reserve Act was the nail in the coffin to sign away America, because already we see the trajectory of a military industrial complex, of lobbying, like Flippy just said, and on and on. But so they go to Hawaii and they serve lemonade and cookies. And you know how women, they wear like the coconuts with the hula skirts. Well, that was too revealing in 1905. So they made them wear Western clothing, cover up, and did the hula. So that looked a little odd. They looked like tourists going to Hawaii to do the hula. And so the way they found we got Hawaii was Captain James Cook, Templar, who had ancient Templar maps, discovered the islands. And he wrote how they were exceptionally strong and nourished and vigorous, and they had no infectious diseases. And eventually, once the Americans, the English, the white got there, tuberculosis smacked Hawaii. And the main man sailing these ships at the time were low-level people. 3/4 of the people in England had typhus, typhoid, measles, smallpox, bronchitis, whooping cough, TB, convulsions. And Cook's crew, say that 10 times, was filled with people suffering from venereal diseases and from the aforementioned illnesses, because this was the lowest of the low. So when Cook got to Hawaii, does he quarantine them? No, he takes over a sacred place of worship to the Hawaiians, and he turns into a makeshift hospital. In 1786, a French captain sailed to the island just so a few years later. And what did he write? He wrote how many Hawaiians are covered in, the pus boobles, scars, warts, ulcers, basically just looked like a big pimple on them all over. And this was because the English brought that. Oh, wait, let me just read another Princess Alice thing from the narrative exchange. She paid many of the clan lodges to shill for Britain. What do you mean clan lodges? Like Ku Klux Klan? And had sponsored many articles in the Dearborn Press, Henry Ford's publication. Fat narrative. You are the man, dude. What an amazing thing. This is really painting a picture of Princess Alice. Wow. Fascinating. And so the population before Cook got there was 2 million. It was over 1 million people. In 2 generations, the Hawaiian population went down to 130,000. So we killed what? Not we personally, but we brought the death that killed 80% of Hawaiians. Mark Twain wrote a hilarious quote: Hawaiians suffer from various complicated diseases, education, and civilization. He said he proposed to send a few more missionaries to totally finish them off. That's a funny joke. And then the rich people came into the fertile soil of Hawaii trying to buy the land. And just like the Native Americans, the Hawaiians couldn't understand the concept of selling land. They couldn't grasp this concept. But eventually, these rich people got into the ear of the king, who instituted mass land reforms, allowing all these people to purchase the land. So this one company, Castle and Cook, from the Cook family, became the largest landowner. Castle and Cook is still around today. I think they changed their name, but Dole Fruit, it's spurred out of Castle and Cook. Dole Pineapples, the United Fruit Company. Oh, and I'm jumping the gun here. So let me just continue. So it was no different how we talk about BlackRock controlling all the farmland. We have been colonized the same way America colonized Hawaiians by buying up all their fertile, rich land, taking it out from the native people that live there for people that needed to survive, jobs, whatever, support their family. And so again, nothing is new under the sun. Nothing to new. Oh, it didn't disappear for me. Does everyone else have the chat? I hope we didn't. I don't think we lost. Test. Let's see. All right, I got it sent. So hopefully it worked. Come back. All right, phew. We don't want any, technical issues here. So anyway, the Hawaiians got the same exact thing. Illuminate confirmed Dole pineapples. Now that's going on the show, Jeff. Illuminate confirmed Dole pineapples, baby. Yes, they are. So when you eat that pineapple, know you're supporting the Illuminati. So there was a bunch of sugar plantations on Hawaii. That was the cash crop, and they were a little late for slavery. Slavery ended. They couldn't send a boatload of slaves there, but what they could do was save contract laborers. So what they did, mostly from China and Japan, and they were bound for 3 to 5 years, and the whites were soon outnumbered 20-1 because of all these contract laborers they were bringing in, and their love for democracy just wasn't as strong then. Why doesn't everybody vote here? We're the big democracy humanitarians. Can't we have everybody vote? Ooh, now we don't like democracy. We're outnumbered 20-1. So in 1875, they forced a treaty to have Hawaii allow U.S. military bases, and U.S. sugar exports soared over the next decade. So Americans essentially made Hawaii a colony of their new country. And 1887, the whites realized they needed to fully overthrow the king for the American constitutional republic because we love democracy. You can't have a king. We're late in the game here, folks. You got to catch up. Democracy is the new God, and we worship it. So they essentially kidnapped the king, forced him to sign a constitution literally at gunpoint, and whites now had 3/4 of a vote equal to Hawaiians who had 1/4 of a vote. And Americans' golden hour would come in 1891 when the Queen took power to try and save Hawaii. Her husband died. And American newspapers, what do? Just like they did the Filipinos, they drew her as this cannibal wearing bone necklace, crooked teeth, like a dirty crown, mouth breather. And she tried to secretly plan to get rid of the new constitution, to take at least Hawaii back a few decades where we weren't totally enslaved. And so what does the Americans do with this? Just like the 4 drunk Filipinos that came into camp unarmed, that started like the Filipino-American War, they use this as an excuse, a false flag, to justify sending the military into Hawaii. So 162 heavily armed armed Marines marched through the peaceful streets for the safety of American life and property. They surrounded the royal palace, forcing the Queen out, which is weird because they said they were there to protect American property. Well, the royal palace is not American property. So again, we have been using false justifications to enter into war for economic reasons forever. And it's not going to stop. It's never going to stop until the government collapses. But isn't that crazy? It's just like nothing changes. The Gulf of Tonkin, the shooting of Franz Ferdinand, whatever. All these things, these kickoff reasons for the wars and for battles, they're all lies, dude. They're literally all for economic reasons. Not a single war has been for morals or values. They don't care about morals and values, the people funding these wars. They care about money, and that's all they care about. Propaganda never dies, Annika. You got it, dude. You got it. And so the Queen, she wrote like a letter to the newly elected president, Grover Cleveland, and because Harrison wanted to annex Pearl Harbor. Thank you, David. And that's going to play into our story as we finish here. There was a mass stealing of wealth of Germans, Italians, and Japanese in America in 1942. Absolutely, there was. Narrative. Have you ever read The Gold Hunters? I did a show on it, but how America found trillions of dollars worth of gold that Japan had accumulated over the 100 years they were ravaging Asia, that they hid in booby-trapped mines. If not, I'll send you the book, dude. DM me on Twitter or something. But I just love how the American government was using the military to open up foreign markets. So the point, why do we want Hawaii so bad? There's not enough sugar land to make us want it this bad, because we want Hawaii as a stepping stone. Teddy Roosevelt does, and his backers, to use as a stepping stone to hit China, to get the 400 million people market. And so that's the whole point of this. It's not like just Hawaii's resources. They want to get and trade with China because they realize, America had 89 million people. China had 400 million people. And Grover, it sounded like a good guy. He wrote, "I'm ashamed of the whole affair." But after after Grover, obviously Hawaii gets annexed. But after the Taft luncheon, they went to watch the surfers, the birthplace of surfing. Alice claimed that Taft made journalists promise no photos of her in her bathing suit. And at 5:30 p.m., they left Hawaii for our last trip, Japan. And last part of the trip in Japan. And this is my favorite part of the whole show. So let me just see how many pages I got left. All right. We'll go quick. I got to eat dinner after this. So the Manchuria steamed along from Hawaii to Japan. The press, using the pointless details of Alice, she jumped in the pool with her clothes on. To hide the real reason from what the cruise was doing. So again, our press does this today. Alice jumped in the pool with her clothes on. She's crazy. Well, why are they all traveling Asia? Oh, they're just for democracy. Do you need 80 people for democracy? Do you need to take all these different people with countries that we're not in war with? Why can't you just send one? But let's not ask that question. Taft was carrying the real secret mission that would forever alter America's course in Asia. And the U.S. Constitution required Teddy to put agreements with foreign countries in writing and submit them to the Senate. And Teddy considered such things a waste of time. Now, again, I'm like a little bit of a monarchist, so I understand Teddy's logic. I understand if it's a very nationalistic move, right? And that's why I don't fault him to the level like, oh, he's an evil, horrible person, because though it was evil to these other countries, it worked out well for America. Was he doing it for Americans or was he doing it for his lobbyists? Probably not Americans, but I guess we don't really know. So it's just, it's difficult, right? You understand the conundrum I'm in. I want to say this is evil, and it was evil, but I also am on the other side where Well, it was a nationalistic move. So they pulled in 1905, and they were greeted by a bunch of cheering Japanese, waving flags, shouting "Banzai!" And they would go, "American guest, Banzai! Allison Taft, Banzai! Japanese in America, Banzai!" Which I think is adorable. I mean, I think I want to start saying Banzai, but I can just imagine like this recently opened country. Let's just continue. So each stop, though, the crowd was greeted by lots of bonsai'd crowds. The press ate it up like, "See, we're loved in Asia. Oh my God, the Japanese love the Americans because we're such humanitarians. We will help everybody. We're the big brother they never had." And so Japan had just fought Russia when we got there from the past 19 months in the Russo-Japanese War. And they whooped the Russians. I don't know if you guys know much about the Russian-Japanese War. I don't know very much either, but it's been mentioned in a few books I've read. And they whooped them in the largest land battle in world history at the time, and then whooped them in the largest sea battle in the history of mankind. And the Japanese were delirious with pride because just 52, this is Japan's so fascinating. Just 52 years prior to beating the hell out of Russia, Imperial Russia, Japan had been a closed, pre-industrialized society. Now they became the first non-white, non-Christian country to defeat a white Christian power in a time when this was unbelievable. And Teddy declared us neutral in the conflict, but the Japanese knew this wasn't the case. This is the reason for the Imperial Cruise. Only a few Japanese leaders knew about the secret plan with Teddy and the Emperor Meiji being connected and doing backroom deals, but that's what they were doing. And they knew Roosevelt would grant them a protectorate in Korea for exchange for Japan's assisting in the American penetration of Asia. So Teddy, this deal, he's going to sell Korea to Japan, not get involved, even though we signed deals with Korea to protect them, to be their big brother. And Emperor Gojun, or King Kojun of Korea, he thought that America was his buddy. We signed them away for the chance to get into China and trading. So it took 70 more years until Nixon opened up China and Kissinger, but this was a long planned game. So from 1753 to 1853, Japan had no contact with U.S. had no contact with the country known as Nippon. From 1850, though, this is a fascinating story. This is how Japan opened up. It's going to put America in a great light. So just watch. In 1850, at a time when you would think America was still a solid country, a good place, there was this guy, Commodore Matthew Perry. He kind of helped win the war in Mexico with the largest U.S. invasion until 1942. And that was a huge invasion, right? And basically America wanted China, and they have coal-powered ships. So the idea was to hit Hawaii, refuel, hit Japan, refuel, and get to China. 47,000 miles Hawaii to China. And now there was an issue, though. Americans knew nothing about Japan. They were a closed country. They didn't allow outsiders. They didn't allow information to leave. They only traded with the Dutch on a little makeshift island that was like a jail cell. That's where the Dutch were the only ones who would go there to trade with the Japanese. And Christian missionaries first arrived in Japan in 1543, and the Japanese were very open-minded with the Christians, very kind to them. The missionaries demanded a choice be made. They say, you either, follow us, or you demanded a choice to be made. They demanded a choice. And then their ruler, Shogun Tokugawa, he became suspicious of this religion and demanded loyalty to a non-Japanese god. And he also came to the conclusion, this king, Shogun, that Christianity was a conquest religion, using Jesus as an aid in this conquest. Now, I'm a Christian, and I never thought of that before, of the Christianity being a conquesting religion. And I don't think it's really a conquesting religion. I think the people at power use Christianity as a conquesting tactic. I'd be interested if you guys agree with that. I'm sure there's a few non-Christians in the chat, but just interesting. So anyway, in 1614, to stop the Christian takeover, Tokugawa closed the island, sealing it, banishing all Western missionaries. So for 200 years, Japan was a closed society. And these Japanese Christians could either renounce the Christian faith or be crucified. Ironic. But he forbade travel abroad. He only allowed ships with square sterns to be made because they could not travel long distance in the sea.
death sentence for anyone who had foreign documents or gave foreign info about Japan. Isn't that fascinating, guys? Like, how could you imagine that today for close saying we're done, we're closing 200 years, no one's coming in, no one's leaving. And and I told you about how the Dutch would come and they trade in this prison-like place. But for more than 2 centuries, a great peace was over Japan. The centuries before that, they had the samurai battles where it was all these factions in Japan vying for power. There was so much death, guys. I mean, it was brutal. I don't want to give an estimate, but let's just say like 20% of Japan's population was slaughtered in these battles that it took to unify Japan in 1500s. So then there's a show on Netflix that goes the history of Japan. Highly recommend, of that time of unifying Japan. I highly recommend it. But all that money that, the 400 million America spent on the military was not spent in Japan for 200 years. So haiku poetry, their tea ceremonies, woodblock prints, kabuki theater all got their footing in this period. That's why Japanese culture is so strong and prominent and fascinating and amazing, and we value it. Swords, all their, how hardworking and focused, blah, talented they are. It's because for these 200 years, this was instilled in the population, in the collective consciousness. And Japan became the most literate country in the world. Amazing what happens when you don't fight wars, right? So why this closing protected Japan? It left a power vacuum for Britain, Russia, and Spain to fight for control of the Pacific. And America knew the Japanese government wanted to be left alone, but we don't like leaving people alone. From 1790 to 1853, their closed country, we knocked on their door 27 times. 27 times. We visited ships to knock on their door and say, hey, open up. We want to talk to you. We want to trade with you. We want to be your buddies. Musashi mentality. I don't know what that is, Flippy. Please explain. Sounds fascinating, though. But isn't that so? Again, like, we call ourselves an isolationist country. We say the founding fathers, blah, blah, blah. In 1790, we already started knocking on Japan's door. That doesn't seem very American. That doesn't seem very freedom-loving to try and get them to trade when they explicitly state, we don't want anything to do with you. Stop coming here. And then come another 27 times. Does that sound like an isolationist policy? Oh, we just love free trade. That's the worship. Oh, legendary samurai and flosser. Dude, I love Japan, Flippy. If you have any books or whatever, I just am so fascinated by it. Like kamikazes? What? And the media has lied and said like they would take meth pills beforehand. I read a bunch of, I did a deep dive on this. Some maybe did, the Nazis did, but the Japanese, these kamikazes, not really. They just had that much pride and love and admiration for their emperor, for their sun god. So anyway, we knock on their door. So Commodore Perry, right, in 1850, he says, we're knocking on Japan's door. Knocks on their door. Did he just go with his ship? This is a treaty ship. This is to trade. We just want to be your buddy. Did he go with one ship and maybe a big gift? No, he brought the largest fleet of American warships to ever travel, hoping to strike fear in the pre-industrialized Japan. So on July 1853, Perry sailed unannounced into Tokyo Bay with a fleet of Navy warship brimming with cannons. The vessels shocked the Japanese, who had not seen any industrial machines before their closed country. Temple bells rang the alarm and the word spread quickly. Families ran away from their home with just what they could hold on their backs. And unpracticed samurai who hadn't practiced for 200 years, as the descendants of the descendants, tried to defend their country. It was useless. The Japanese were forced to allow Perry ashore, and Perry said he came with negotiations and proposals. He said, no, I know I just fired on you. I'm your friend. I want to help you. But if you don't agree to my proposals, see these ships, I got 50 ships here now, and I can get 50 more here in 20 more days. So not really a compromise proposal. And he warned, did you see what happened to Mexico? And obviously they didn't see what happened to Mexico. They've been a closed country for listen how much of a chotch this guy is, Commodore Perry. He said, did you see what happened in Mexico? They said, no, we're a closed country. We haven't seen anything. And he said, well, that'll happen to you. And they said, this makes we don't know what this means. Why? Okay, what's going to happen to us? And so then luckily he had 2 books that were written about him in his war in Mexico that he gave the Japanese to say, this is what'll happen to you. Isn't that so lame, dude? Like, you better watch it. We're going to do what we did to Mexico to you. Oh, we haven't talked to, we have no idea what you did. Well, you're lucky. I brought 2 books that glorify my ability, my actions, and how I slaughtered people. But the Japanese, they reluctantly signed in 1858. And so then in 1861, Russia invaded a Japanese island because clearly they're weak. America just came in and whooped them like that. And Japan beat them back, losing only a few soldiers, but it sent the signal Japan's weak. So Britain and US shelled Japanese civilians because they fired on some of their ships. Their closed country was open to the white Christians now walking the streets. Then we force our democratic parliament upon them and rid their way of life to westernize and exploit them. Exactly, Jeff. Exactly. And that's why I hate the melting pot or whatever. Diversity is your strength. Well, then actually allow diversity. Stop trying to melt everything together. This works in this country, and democracy isn't the best form of government as much. It's the most corrupt form of government, but you can't force people to do this by slaughtering them. Peace through strength. That's not what, encouraging diversity is. But, we're talking to the choir, right, Jeff? They don't care. They don't care. So anyway, in a few nationalistic samurais, they fought their way into the royal compound in 1868, taking control of the young Emperor Meiji, who was only 15 years old at the time. And so Japan had its own founding fathers. So they're a remarkable group of guys, like our founding fathers, brilliant men. They decided they're going to create a new Japan and guide her into the 20th century. So Japan looked around at opium-addicted China, controlled by Britain or French, or Vietnam controlling France, and all realized no non-white country had ever maintained its independence once a military landed on their soil. So Japan realized whites felt justified in subjugating Asians because they were racially inferior. So what did Japan do? And this is what's going to come to World War II. Japan said, well, we aren't Asians. We aren't like the savage Asian countries. They separated themselves. They distinguished themselves from the rest of Asia. And just as their island was unattached, they removed themselves, right? We are honorary Aryans. And Japan would emulate the West military powers. Unlike all these other countries that we colonized, that we imperialized, they adopted our values and our way of life. They had a new national slogan, rich country, strong military. And Japan did what no other country had done. It opened its doors to Western ways, and instead of resisting, it modernized and militarized. Hundreds of volumes of this was their quote, hundreds of volumes of international law are no match for a few cannon. A handful of friendly treaties cannot compete with a little gunpowder. Cannons and gunpowder are machines that can make principles where there are none. And Japan also concluded that their Buddhist were not conquest gods. So they needed a conquest god, the counterpart to the Western god. So what do? The founding fathers, they reinvented the boy emperor, and they made him into the state. They kind of did the Christian tradition with him. The state Shinto was born. The man that when he dies, he will be up in the sun. That is what they created in Japan. So that didn't exist before we came in there. So I didn't know that the Sun King that China had, the Sun Emperor, Japan picked the same exact pattern up and used it to raise their populace into fighting for one person. Sounds like what the movie The Last Samurai was about. Interesting, dude. I'll have to look into it. Then we hijacked Okinawa. Yes. Infiltrate, divide, destroy, Gollemize minorities. Hilarious, dude. Yeah, that's exactly it. But so they can't, like, so all the so they made their king a god king. And instead of shunning foreign ways as China and other Asian countries had done, the Japanese tossed their Chinese-style robes and donned U.S. Western trousers and ties. And this was just the beginning. They strung telegraph wires, practiced with knives and forks instead of chopsticks, opened Japan to Western teachers, missionaries, government advisors. The founding Japanese fathers also advised displaced the top of the Japanese youth to study abroad. The first 2 Japanese students to study abroad, they asked, what were you studying in America? How to build big ships, how to make big gun to prevent powers from taking possession of their country. Cannons, rifles, warships became a part of the state budget, wearing Western uniforms, even having Western-style handlebar mustache. And their attempts to emulate the white Christians, they became the honorary Asians in the American mind, the Yankees of the Far East. So where do you hear honorary honorary Aryans again? In World War II. So this started because Teddy Roosevelt worked out a backroom deal to get them power so we could trade with China. We are the reason we're the reason why Japan became our enemy in World War II, almost like we knew it would happen, or we didn't care. We created it. We didn't think that far ahead. But isn't that crazy, guys? That's why Japan is the way it is, because of us, because of our American government officials. And at the 1876 Philadelphia World's Fair, they had, China had American Indians extinction. Blacks were thick-headed laborers. Chinese was a dying race, but the Japanese was all sunshine and rainbows. This was the quote: Japan renders her verdict in favor of American machinery. They adopted costumes and progressive spirit, inclining her people to adopt American ideas and machinery. Then a guy in 1872, he goes into Japan, Charles Legendre. He is missing part of his nose, part of his eye, part of his jaw. He was in the Civil War. He walked into hails of bullets and still made it out. He was an ambassador in China. So he goes to Japan and he shows them how do you infiltrate a country, how you take it over using legalities and rationales. And he said, let's take Taiwan, Japan. Let's do it. And the reason why he's so gung-ho about it is because he was promised he'd be governor of Taiwan. And Japan would use they essentially adopted a Japanese Monroe Doctrine. Like the doctrine that inspired us to go west, Japan had their own Monroe Doctrine, just like they had their own Japanese founding fathers. And Japan would use these same words that America taught them in the 1900s, in the 30s and 40s, as they accumulated more and more land in the Asian continents, in Asia. And Legendre, the guy missing an eye and stuff, he recommended to pacify and civilize the Asians, if possible, if not, exterminate them. And the reason why they went Taiwan was also because Taiwan fired on Okinawans, and Okinawa wasn't part of Japan at this point. They were a protectorate of Japan, and not even a protectorate when the Taiwans killed these few Okinawans. But they used that as justification to go attack. And again, America, how many times have we had proxy wars? Oh, you attacked so-and-so. Well, we defend them. Do we really? Have we defended them ever before? Or are you just saying that so we can go to war? And so in 1873, Japan sailed to Korea like Commodore Perry did to Japan. They said, hey, we're friends, but let's get it in writing that we're friends. And the two countries had enjoyed peace for hundreds of years. But Japan explained to them that the Emperor Meiji is actually the Sun King, just like the god of China. So you need to respect him of that, but he's the only one. And the Koreans, they weren't gung-ho about signing this. They kind of laughed at the Japanese and their new clothing and all that stuff. But eventually the royal prince in Korea in 1884 gets stabbed in an assassination attempt. I wonder who did that. I wonder who inspired that assassination. And he was saved by an American. So the Americans, it formed a treaty. We became their like big brother essentially. And we had them sign all these treaties. It was so cute. And I think it's cute because my wife's Korean. So I think of her and I think of like it's stereotypical Korean men. And so the King Gojin, he walked around, he's real quiet. And he always talked about, he would always go back to, oh, America will protect us. They're our big brother. America will watch out for us. Jesuits. Yeah. Yeah. And so they thought they were safe. So they signed this treaty with Japan. Little did they know, very soon Japan would annex. It was actually at the green light from the American president that they could annex Korea, and America would not defend them. And so they used Japan. So he did this so they could use Japan as a jumping off point, as I said, to China. So without using Congress or any treaty papers, Roosevelt acted as a king of America and made a backroom deal with Taft heading to Japan. And remember the Banzai Cheers? Well, so after the Russian-Japanese war ended, Japanese wanted Russia to pay them indemnities. And Roosevelt, in writing and using proxy sources, told them, oh yeah, I support you in the Russian-Japanese war. We'll get that for you. And when the war ended and Japan won, they said, let's get that 20 million. Well, they couldn't get the 20 million because now Roosevelt, he can't say this because that's against his rules as president. He can't make treaties without passing it to the Congress. And so he went silent. And they come back to Japan after doing like China, then their Imperial Cruise, and they actually had to leave because they were being yelled at, screamed at. The Banzais were gone. They hated America. This whole time that Japan thought, oh, America's supporting us. They want us to grow. And yeah, they hated us at the end. And so also Japan immediately flipped on America in this time. And the way they won the Russian war, one of the ways is they did a quick like sneak attack. Okay. It was a hard, fast, lightning attack before Russia could respond. Now, when did that happen again? Oh, that's right. That happened 40 years later with the attack on Pearl Harbor. And where did they get this idea? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the thousands of government officials and the military that were all teaching Japan how to modernize and militarize. Oh, maybe they didn't share any info. Right, right. So I know this book wasn't a conspiracy theory. I think America was soft colonized in the 20th century. I think America got sold out. Dude, that David and Flippy, that is it, dude. Because I said, Flippy, how like BlackRock, Bill Gates owns all of our farmland. What do you call that? That's colonization. It's the same, someone of our colony, but they're not doing it for our benefit. So what is that? They're using it to extract resources or to starve us, hoard resources. So anyway, I know this wasn't a conspiracy theory, but the point of this book was that backroom dealings, lobbying, colonization, just like these two fine, smart gentlemen said, has been around forever. False flags to start wars, not abiding by the law by our elected officials, all these things, and we don't know about it. And we definitely don't know about it today because nobody cares. Nobody reads history. So this book just helped me realize, one, Teddy probably shouldn't have his name on his face on Mount Rushmore. He was a big faker and a liar. And two, we have been using the military for economic gain for a long, long time. And the Constitution has meant nothing for hundreds of years, maybe even since it was written, because where does it say all these things that America has done in the past? Where does it say we can do that? Where does it say in the Constitution you should be taxed 40% of your salary? It doesn't say it anywhere. No, these Constitution fell apart because people like Teddy Roosevelt, people like Woodrow Wilson, scumbag tyrants took over and changed America. And I won't put Teddy in a scumbag group. He's, I respect the nationalistic tendencies. Woodrow, you're a scumbag, but America has been a corrupt, crony capitalistic country, imperialistic country for a long time. Why do you think we would change now? Right? It's just different. Now, at least there was nationalistic goals at that time, but now it's to ruin America. It's to destroy the world, to enslave the global population. And nobody sees the connections, the similarities, the same tricks and tips because they're going to watch whatever, NFL, XFL, I don't know, the NBA, and they just don't care. So thank you for the 11 people in the chat that cared enough to watch this show. We had some great stuff in the chat. Flippy and David and Narrative Exchange. You killed it, dude. You killed it. So if you want to support the show, I'm Jack Allen at Kojak Podcast. I'm going to go eat dinner. And then next week, I got a huge show. Listen to this, guys. Nick Hinton and Bob's Lessons on the same show Thursday, 8 or 9 o'clock. I think we're going to do it. So that's going to be a real big fun one. And income tax was supposed to too much TikTok. Ooh, I like it, Annika. And then, so I got that show coming up. And then I'm going to be on Tinfoil Hat in 5 days, the 27th. So check us out there. We're going to be talking, I think, either nukes or pirates, but it'll be a good show regardless. So, guys, thanks for listening. I might be live tomorrow. We'll see. But I'm Jack Allen with Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless. Take care. And I'll see you next week or maybe tomorrow. All right. See you guys.